Okay, here we are. So nice. So we were saying that we're probably quite a small group because of American Thanksgiving, but that's okay. We decided we would go ahead anyway because it will be recorded. So people can listen to how we were gathered here together today. So shall we start with a nice kind of grounding practice in the body? Just to say hello to our bodies. Jillian's getting her cover to her coffee or tea and to be warm in the body. Yeah, so we really take time, right, to bring all of us into being together here, which is such a wonderful thing to be able to do when we're informed in the body. Okay, so slowly and gently dropping your attention somewhere down into the center of your body. Just following your breath. Sometimes I see this kind of visual of leaves, beautiful leaves in the fall, just gently falling down, bringing attention down into the trunk. And then inviting your body to speak to you. And let's just ask the question, how do I feel in here? How safe am I inside? Being with my body from the inside. And where am I in my nervous system? So we get a sense of that in checking in with our heart rate. Just noticing if it's a little bit elevated. Or if it feels really steady. Or if it feels kind of sluggish in there. And noticing in your limbs if there's some constriction or tightness in there.
Okay, so it expired.
When did it expire?
Mm-hmm. Maybe it feels really settled in your limbs, your arms and your legs. Just checking to see. Or maybe there's a kind of limp quality to your body, more like a dorsal place. And we just say hello to it all. Giving lots of love and care to the body. So here we are, we've got some time to be together and to explore all of what happened in the Polyvagal Summit when we all came together, 750 people. All the curiosity and your ideas and whatever wants to come to be here today. And then just notice if there's a sort of the beginnings of a felt sense that starts to form in the body. Some physical sensation, some feelings attached to that, or thoughts. Maybe some memories. Something about what brings you right here into the moment today. And then when you're ready, you can very gently and slowly begin to bring yourself back to your space. It's kind of opening your eyes. And joining the group again. So, everybody back? I want to thank Annette for helping us to organize the meeting today, and to welcome Rob McFadden, who's a retired professor emeritus, but still teaching lots of Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto. And Rob teaches a course, right, on neuroscience and social work. And so I thought it would be fun to have him come today and be with us. So can we get a sense of how many people were actually able to make it to the summit and or have watched parts of it? A few. Okay, great. Okay, so does somebody want to, Rob, do you want to start, or does somebody want to start us off? There were, you know, a number of different areas, right? So our group is trauma and addiction, but there were areas of study in education, in healthcare, in body-based psychotherapies, and also in looking at paradigm shifts, which is the one that I spoke at.
Yeah, I just finished watching the session. Is it Arius, right?
Ariel
Ariel.
Schwartz, yeah.
No, the last name.
Oh, yes, it was what's it? Les Area.
Yes,
Les Area.
Arius, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
a pain psychologist. If you get a chance, take a look at his you know, his presentation. And he has a PowerPoint with it too, just superb. And he really is translating what we know about pain into the context of polyvagal. And just like one of the best I've seen. It's brief, it doesn't overwhelm you, and it's just super. I just saw it this morning, right? So I just wanted to share that and highlight it, because I mean, we all have pain at some point in time in our lives. It's a great way of understanding it and working through. I saw a lot of connections with meditation as well, and polyvagal, both of them.
Yeah, really, he's such a nice guy, and really interesting to see the intersections in the shifting paradigms through understanding chronic pain through the autonomic nervous system. And it makes so much sense when we look at people who are often experiencing chronic pain, right?
Well, he made one point. I don't know if anybody can click with this too. You know, in mindfulness, curiosity is really important. In fact, a major filter in using mindfulness is what's called COAL, COAL, which stands for curiosity, openness, acceptance, and loving kindness. So that's what, when you are doing what's called an open meditation, we're just sitting in meditation, letting things come in and letting them go out. That's the filter that you need to use. So what struck me was that his first piece, which is the C for curiosity, he's integrated into his understanding of pain. Basically, what he's saying is that it's so important when we have pain, first of all, not to run from it, because that's what causes it to get worse. And then to lean into it, which is also a mindfulness expression, leaning into it. And part of the way you do that is by staying curious about it. In other words, being able to attend to it, the frequency, where it's, how it moves in and out. Because when you go into curiosity, then you move away from defensiveness. So when you go into curiosity, you're moving into ventral vagal.
Yeah, absolutely. And this also it crosses beautifully with Gendlin's focusing practice. We would say that you welcome the uncomfortable.
Right.
So we do the very opposite of what we're socialized to do, which is to run away from and dissociate from and shut down the uncomfortable. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful crossing that he has in his work. Also works with addiction, which he and I want to connect around that, because, you know, that's also part of this paradigm shift, is really understanding addictions as these state regulation strategies for shifting from one state to the other, and how, you know, that ventral presence is so important in addiction. And in, of course, with chronic pain, people become addicted. They become addicted to the meds that shut the body down, right, or numb it. So yeah, and he's a great presenter. Yeah, that's good.
In mindfulness, there's something called the second arrow. It was about a Chinese warrior who was shot with the first arrow in the chest, and of course caused a lot of pain and everything. But it was the second arrow, which was the worst. And it's the arrow, it was never an arrow, it's the arrow of suffering. So that's distinguishing, you know, the pain sensations from the fear and the suffering, the second arrow. And it's that second arrow that can get us.
Yeah. You're welcome to put questions in the chat as well.
Andrea, go ahead, Andrea.
I watched that presentation and I really liked it as well. As somebody who has experienced chronic pain my whole life, and then I've worked with a lot of people as a health coach with chronic pain, it's kind of a chicken or egg situation, that if you can be curious about your chronic pain, then you know you're in a ventral state. But and really it's a matter of moving people out of some of these other states into that ventral state, so that they can look at it with curiosity, because that's such a key to healing. And so I had to work with myself, and then I work with my clients, is, you know, once we can feel safer in our body, which is hard to do when you're in chronic pain, it really is scary. And you don't have the energy. So then often you'll go into a dorsal state because you don't want to do anything. You're afraid, and then you shut down, or you're in some blended version of it. So you kind of know when a person is able to start being curious about their chronic pain. Well, maybe if I try this, or maybe if I do that, then they're not in one of those other states which are so detrimental to healing. So, but I really enjoyed his talk as well. I really did. And the fact that it's Kaiser Permanente, which is a major medical establishment, is allowing somebody to do this kind of, or encouraging somebody within their organization, to me is really encouraging as well. So.
That was a big part of the summit, was really recognizing the power of these paradigm shifts to bring in this embodied way of understanding ourselves. And I found it really, really helpful to feel encouraged, because it's really hard work. And particularly in certain areas, You know, I think the healthcare people, the physicians, it was really clear how it's really challenging to change people's ways of understanding what it is that they're dealing with, particularly as Molly was saying, when you've invested so much in one way, there's a lot of like resistance to let go of that and to be curious, to be completely open and fresh thinking about a new way. It's hard. So we have a lot of work to do to gently and I think also really passionately encourage people, right, to be curious. Yeah, I'm just noticing some people's names here, and it's so nice to see, to put faces to names on our group list. Yeah, people coming and being together. So what else?
Sam, you had your hand up?
Sam?
Yeah, I just with Andrea and Rob's point about the chronic pain presentation, I like the fact that he framed exactly Andrea's point about you have to work through the fear of the pain in the body before you can start doing some more of this polyvagal work and get people. And I like that framing of like that the pain gets paired with fear of being in pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, I had the same kind of mind track of, I think one of the reasons his presentation was so compelling is because he had that embodied presentation of like calm, curious, but passionate. And that must be one of the reasons that he was able to make space in his organization and in the healthcare system that is normally more resistant. It's because he has this calm, persistent energy without the shame or guilt that can get triggered when we get really passionate. Because I really resonated with Molly's presentation and the doctors of being like really fed up, really frustrating, wanting to keep pointing at the evidence and be like, how do you not see it?
Yeah,
right. And
it's hard not to get mad.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely one of the reasons his presentation stood up so well is because he has that other energy, that calm, persistent, curious, optimistic, that if he sticks around, he can create change.
Well, that's ventral, right? That's part of the social engagement system. So we want to engage with him. We don't want to turn away because he's telling us something that feels threatening. I think, wasn't it in the beginning of that somebody, the way Randall introduced Les was to say that, did I make this up? That Steve says he's one of the most ventral people he knows. I think that came across. Yeah. But that's precisely why we do need to meet like this, right? Because we need to support each other in this pioneering work so that we don't just become angry and bitter about things. And that's like the last place where we could really affect change. Then we just turn people off. But it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. Do people find that when you're working with people? Is there that sense of really wanting to like just bring people along and get the point across? And yeah. How many people here work with people as coaches or therapists or whatever? Most people? Yeah. And are you bringing polyvagal theory into your work? Yeah. And how do you do that? Maybe it would be great to share some of that. Yeah.
I'll jump in because I'm an old focuser, but I'm a new intern. So I'm coming to doing the counseling. But Samantha's remarks really very helpful for me because I'm also been in higher ed a long time and I am angry and bitter and want change. And so thank you, Samantha, because it really speaks to me in my dean's meetings. Like I need to go into ventral more than pounding the table about suicide, funding the counseling center for suicides. I need to. But I bring in breath. Jan, I'm new, and so I bring in breath work. I bring in sometimes visualization with cold water, just but lovely, like where they want to do that. I'll say, you know, maybe you're floating in water, or maybe you're laying on a hill, but I try to always bring the breath and make the breath the vehicle. And I could use more techniques.
Yeah,
frankly.
well, breath and sound are the two major portals to activate that ventral vagus. So particularly with extending the exhalation breath, right? It's such a simple way of helping people to begin to go and find that ventral place inside when you start to get activated and lose it. Such a simple way of doing it, and doing it together. So we're doing it with our clients, and particularly in groups like this is incredibly powerful. It's a little turbo engine that helps us to stay and to feel more of that sense of being with each other through all of this. Yeah. Jillian's doing my integrative focusing therapy training. So we're getting to know each other more and more. Yeah, we're really bringing in focusing practice, Jenilyn's work with polyvagal theory. Blends so beautifully. Yeah.
Well, I'm almost done your book. It's so marked up right now. Lines and stars and all that kind of stuff. So between your book and then I listened, Deb Dana did a 6-hour incredible presentation for those of us as part of the package. And I'm using a lot of that as well. Those techniques that are in there. So I'm using some of yours, although I'm still a little confused about the charts and things. So I'm still playing with that, and I might need a little more help with you on that. But I think Ariel may have, because I'm a yoga teacher as well, may have done this one interesting breath. I think she did it, that I had not seen before or used before, where you breathe into the count of 4 through your nose, open mouth, breathe out with a sound to the count of 8. And then the last exhale through the nose, you push out, and I think Ariel did this, you push out the last little bit through the nose. And I've been doing this with my yoga students, and at first they're like, especially those of us that have anxiety, exhaling that long is really frightening. It's like you like to inhale. But I've had several people like that say to me, I don't like doing it, but I love the way I feel afterwards. And so it is shifting their state, but it's from a state that they're not as familiar with. And you talk a lot about that the familiarity is why we stick with what we're doing. But it really is a very effective one. And then she also did the bee's breath, which I do anyway, which is a nice breath where you're making like a humming sound.
Yes.
Which is really lovely as well.
Yeah, yeah. So. And humming also brings us into ventral.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Michelle. Oh, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say with Andrea, I've been using that breath as well, and I really enjoy that. I have found that with some of my people that are high anxiety, have a hard time with the long exhale, and even with just sitting and breathing and being still, that if I do the breath, but add just a really gentle movement with it, so maybe while they're doing the breath, I'm having them do just a side bend. So they're moving with it until I see they kind of shift into comfort with it, then I'll just have them, okay, now just do 2 more breaths just in stillness, and just kind of see what happens and see if they become a little more comfortable within that. Anyways, that's just one thing I've been playing with, and it seems to be working really nicely. So
that's really interesting. And let's think about that through a polyvagal lens. What is it about the movement that might activate more of that sense of ventral? Do you have a sense of that, Michelle?
I think, well, for a lot of people I work with, it just keeps them feeling their body.
Mhm.
Keeps them noticing, what does this movement feel like? Even just how does the air I'm moving through feel with my arm? You know, whatever it is. So it kind of keeps them there rather than getting up, shifting back up here.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think it keeps them grounded, I guess, a little bit, and just more into that embodied felt sense, especially for people that don't find that easily or can't be there because it gives them anxiety to be there.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm noticing
Well,
that happens.
And as
but-
somebody who has experienced anxiety myself, when I trained to be a restorative teacher, I fidgeted all the time. I could not sit with those long, but when I added gentle somatic movement to a restorative practice, I was able to do it. Somehow it's like those of us that have anxiety, if we can be more deliberate, more in a ventral state, moving, because we're doing it because we want to, rather than in that fight and flight state where our body is moving on its own because it doesn't know how to settle. So that's kind of the way I feel for me, that it actually gives me, it's like, okay, I'm in control of this. I've got that ventral umbrella over me, and it's saying it's safe to move rather than I'm moving because I have to move. You know,
I think that's a really important point. I mean, we're all finding our way with all this, right? But it makes sense to me that if you're in a sympathetic state of anxiety, it doesn't feel safe to stop moving. Immobilization feels scary. And then paying attention to your breath feels like, really scary. So I love the way that you're suggesting that the mobilization feels good because it is that sympathetic place that feels maybe not good, but it's part of what's happening in the body. But there's something that feels good or contained or safe about the way that you're moving. Yeah, that's a neat idea. And one of the great things about all this is that we're finding our way, right? Like, we're kind of thinking about, well, how does that really work in the body? And yeah, Michelle?
Oh, I was just going to mention, I think sometimes for me, from my personal experience and some of my clients, getting them to shift into the curiosity mind frame is difficult, as we know, but I think sometimes the transitionary step is finding appreciation. So it's like if they find appreciation for what their movement is, or, I'm a movement practitioner. I deal with people that come in a lot with an injury or something. And so if I can shift their mindset somehow from, you don't have a bum knee, you have a knee, we all have a knee, sometimes they hurt. And if even sometimes for me, it's teaching them the anatomy and the function of why we have a knee and what it's made for us to do. And it shifts their mindset a little bit. Then it opens that door for curiosity. I'm interested if anybody else has an experience like that.
I think what you're also speaking to there in a way is a paradigm shift, right? You're shifting from a pathologizing model to a really friendly, grounded model of our body, being in our bodies. When we're in our bodies, we are appreciative of our bodies and respectful of our bodies, and sometimes they have trouble. It's just a real paradigm shift coming into the body and honoring the body. And that's a big journey. The other thing about that I wonder about is if you're living a lot in this place of dorsal sympathetic, so there's that freeze response where addictions actually occur a lot, right? Then again, activating to move feels good. But it's movement with containment, which is just perfect, right? Yeah, that's very powerful, that idea of breathing, using the extension of the exhalation and contained, really movement that has a real sense of intentionality, I guess. Yeah, it can feel safe. It always seems to go back to safety in the body. And how, sorry, Jennifer.
I was just going to say, just echoing what Michelle was saying, I actually first heard that concept of honoring the body from Stephen Haynes. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Haynes's work, but he's a lovely, lovely man, trained as a chiropractor and I believe a cranial sacral practitioner, and now a TRE expert as well. But he came to the conclusion in his practice that aiming for the ideal body shape, movement, et cetera, and setting up the idea of this is right and that's wrong, this is correct and this is broken, is a big part of the problem, and understanding what the body is doing and then working with it to support it, which is a very therapeutic, like psychologically therapeutic model as well. Shifts everything. It actually puts you in a different state because you're now not opposed to your body. You're actually working in support of your body and whatever it's trying to do. In terms of what I do in my own work, I work predominantly with veterans and first responders, and incorporating polyvagal theory. I also want to say thank you very much, Jen, because I so enjoyed your presentation at the summit. It actually, the work you're doing was actually what I've been waiting for 20 years to find. So I'm really grateful I found it. I'm really sad that I left Toronto last year for Ottawa.
Well, you can be with us online. Focusing on Gordon is now all online.
Yeah, which is quite.
Come and join us. Yeah.
With the population I work with, there's a profound fear of getting into the body because of the type of trauma that veterans and first responders experience and the state of degradation they're in by the time they get to me. So I've had tremendous success in working with Felt Sense by offering opposites in, and by that I mean, by offering the opportunity to know what the sympathetic charge feels like, and then to invite the experience of the parasympathetic so that they build a concept of the difference, because they come in and they have no idea. They might have a general idea of they're tense, right? There's anxiety, they're rigid, but they don't know what softness feels like. So I start off just working with the face, because actually anything below here will often induce panic. But invite, can you soften your brow? Can you soften your temples? Can you soften the space in front of your ears and around your ears? Your cheekbones, your jaw, your tongue, that whole frontal line that gets activated in that fight or flight response. And that's safe enough because they're in their head anyway. And they start to understand, oh, on, off, right? And so it's really, really fun to work that way. The other thing that I've had really good fun with is bilateral stimulation, along the lines of, I got first introduced to it through Brain Gym of all things, and watching what happens to the nervous system by engaging in that cross lateral stimulation in the body and instantly grounding.
Beautiful work. Yeah. So much to learn. A lot of people ask me about that. It's how do you help people get into the body? How do you make that entranceway in when so many people that we work with have been so deeply traumatized because they were in their bodies, right? So body's really scary then. But that's a beautiful way that you're finding, which also, of course, is activating all of the social engagement system, which I suppose some people might find scary. You'd have to check that, I guess, first, right? How is that for them to, what are you doing in terms of eye contact there?
The beautiful thing is that they've already chosen to come into therapy. So there's already, and they're so desperate for help that it actually doesn't take much to build safety and security. And the invitation to, can you just notice what's going on in your brow? Oh, my brow's fine. Do you think you could soften it a little bit? I'll do it too. Oh yeah, that was totally tense. Or what do you notice in your jaw? Like just try this. Oh my gosh, there's so much pain there. Do you think you could soften it? Yeah. And the difference is so stark And it's so safe, again, because they've left their body and hung out in their head for so long. They don't mind working with that part of them. Which I actually have to do as an introduction before they do breath work, because they're so used to holding their breath, even though the breath is the key, to invite them to do breath work before they have some sense of competency in their physiology, induces panic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to tread so carefully.
Yeah.
So gently, right? This is where, experiential process is so valuable, right? Because as experiential practitioners, we are trained to watch moment by moment interactions in the room, right? Break it down to just moment by moment, what's happening for the other person. And we live in our bodies and we see, just noticing, where did that person go and how did they come back, and slowing everything down and being with this person in this kind of way that demands a lot from us, right? A lot more than sitting behind a desk and being Dr. So-and-so taking notes. That's easy. This is hard work, right? But it's so rewarding.
Yeah, I know I said something before, but what Jennifer just was talking about, my father was a Vietnam vet and a career Marine, so he was always in, so he claimed no trauma. That's what the career people do. They're like, oh, they don't even acknowledge it. So, but it's interesting because some of the women, you could be seeing women and children of the people, and he fits that to a T, but then I inherited it, so it's like I, came to focusing young, thankfully, and meditation young, thankfully. But I remember in my early 20s going, I'm very in my head. And so all the things we can have clients sitting across from us that are children of these folks, and then are embodying that, right?
Yeah. Intergenerational trauma. Yeah.
I've done a lot of work with Wounded Warriors Canada, and we've branched our programming out to not just the veterans and first responders, but their partners and their children. Because essentially those developing nervous systems are stewing in a pot of PTSD in the family. So automatically there's that heightened hypervigilance and awareness and massive sensory stimulation all the time, right? So it's your own version potentially of PTSD.
It's fun to think about mapping each person in the family, each noticing where they are, where their kind of default is in their nervous system. And I was thinking about it would be really neat to write a little article about that, about imagining our parents, our mums and our dads' nervous system default states, and how it just becomes so much easier to forgive them, because that comes into our bodies, right? Yeah. And we see, if our parents are living in this dorsal place, they're not really going to be available to us. But it helps us to really, through that lens, understand their behaviors. Or if they live in rage, people that have this background, Jenlin would call it a background feeling, always a little bit something, and, people that are always a little bit angry. And whatever happens, they're in fight. And so they will interpret that situation through that lens of fight, whereas somebody else will interpret it through, flight, right? And they often pair together. So mom's in flight and dad's in fight. What's happening inside all the little kids in the family? And they tend to take on those different pathways. So it's a very neat way of understanding families and relationships, and I think being more charitable about it all.
Well, I love the idea of mapping the family members, because as soon as I move into trying to understand their nervous system, I'm going into compassion. So I'm going into ventral, right?
Yeah, you're going into ventral and then starting to really reflect, how was it for my mom or my dad in their bodies? And then also with addiction, right? Because addiction shows up way more than we want to ever acknowledge, because it's so shamed. And yet it's these things are such powerful ways of managing these dysregulated states, and the body learns them unconsciously and just will go to it back and forth until we have some real deep awareness of what we're doing, which then again implies that you've got to find some place outside of what's happening there in that pathway to slow the process down and help the person to be curious, right? In focusing, we would say to get the right amount of closeness and distance from the experience. That's how Janlin would talk about it. In his book, Focusing Oriented Therapy, he starts the book by talking about dead ends. And when I read that again more recently, I realized that the dead ends that he was describing are the sympathetic branch of flooding and the dorsal branch of numbing. He doesn't call it that, but that's exactly what he's talking about. Either being too close to an experience, so you're in flight, fight, or you're too far away from it. So he talks about getting the right amount of closeness and distance, which brings you to that sweet spot of grounded ventral energy to then be able to work with these dysregulated states. And Siegel too, right? In his 9 domains of integration. I mean, I love that guy's work, and that his whole 9 domains are in the assessment that I created, an embodied assessment. And the first domain is around consciousness. And, you know, he says, start with that one. You can do the others in different ways, but start with that one, because that one shows you that this person, you're teaching them how to have the capacity to find some ventral energy, to notice where you are and how far you are away from that grounded place, or that place, state of awareness. Yeah.
I have a question, Jan, when we think about mapping parental nervous systems and how that creates a child's nervous system, what factors do we think influence whether someone becomes predominantly sympathetic or predominantly dorsal?
Well, one of the things we know about that, right, is that there is this hierarchy that Steve talks about, and Deb Dana writes about so well, where, you know, we first we're kind of cruising along in ventral, and something happens, and the first place the body goes is to sympathetic, right? And then if we can't manage it there, then the body will shut down. So we know that if you generally speaking, you tend to be a person whose default is sympathetic, then we know, okay, well, there's things going on in the family, but somehow it looks like you were able to resolve it in some way for yourself. Whereas if you've got a family there's a lot of dorsal energy, it really implies a deeper trauma or a deeper experiencing in your own sense. I don't mean the episode or episodes or your life that happened, but how you experience it. Or do you have a way of mobilizing and taking care of yourself? And if you don't, and you go to shutdown, then you know there's a lot going on in there, right? Does that help? I kind of got it. That's how I sort of read it.
I had a question, Jan, about what you were just saying, and it gets at this issue of, do you really have to go through the stages or jump from dorsal to vagal, vagal to dorsal, right? Because when you think about somebody who's had, like with the dorsal, it's an extreme threat, So think about somebody, for instance, who's in a car accident or something. You know, it's so common for them to go into shock right away. I mean, they don't necessarily buzz around and get angry with people, although some people could always do that, but on the whole, go into shock. So is that a drop? Is that a straight drop? Assuming they were in ventral, who knows? But is it a straight drop into dorsal? Does the shock experience reflect a quick drop into dorsal without necessarily going through sympathetic?
You know, we've been talking about this. Leslie Ellis, who's going to do a Nightmares Zoom with us in January. Leslie's work is wonderful, and she actually edited my book. And we were just talking about this the other day. And I mean, I think, you know, what the Steve says is basically you do go through these, and it may be that, you know, that study that is in Bessel van der Kolk's book with Stan and Uta. It was a Canadian, they were on the highway going to London, Ontario, and Ruth Lanius did studies with the two of them. They were in this terrible car accident. Should look it up and have a look at what happens. So Stan, I think it was Uta whose brain, through fMRI imaging, she actually stayed in a pretty sympathetic response. It was Stan who dropped down into dorsal. So, you know, one of the things that Leslie and I were talking about is, does this change with therapy? Like, it may be that is the way that it is without therapy, that we do seem to have to go, if we're going to wake up from dorsal, we need some kind of sympathetic energy to do that, to bring us to that state. But I wonder if that does change somewhat, or maybe the intensity of that sympathetic rush changes so that more ventral presence is there as we build those neural pathways through the neural exercises of psychotherapy and social engagement and prayer and creativity and all of those things. So I'm interested in talking actually with Mark Lewis, who is a neuroscientist and a friend of mine. I wrote a chapter about Mark's work on neuroplasticity in my book. How does how do these practices and the ways in which neural pathways are shaped and we heal through these neural exercises, how does that impact how quickly maybe we move, how efficiently we move? Because I think, you know, I can certainly say I know people whose default place, what they would say, is dorsal. There's a little one over there with Michelle. And as they have worked through a lot of stuff over years and years of therapy, they can recognize when they start dropping down there and quite efficiently bring themselves back. So it's not like you see this huge sympathetic surge, but there must be some kind of energy like that in the body that wakes it up from the dorsal state to mobilize, right? So all of that is to say, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking about it a lot.
Well, Jan, it's interesting you bring this up, because last week I witnessed a horrible car crash. Like, I'm driving down to teach a yoga class, and there is a truck, you know, literally doing circles and coming down on the roof of the car. And then I look over and I see the other car involved, and I felt the shock trauma coming through me. And having all these practices, I just immediately went into them as I'm driving to yoga. I'm teaching yoga class in 10 minutes. And I'm like thinking, you know, 10 years ago, before I started any of this journey, this would have been in me for a while. And I would have been in that fight, or, you know, in that sympathetic state for a long time. And I was able to pretty easily shift out. So I know that's anecdotal, but I think those of us who, you know, are doing these practices, have these experiences, and can really look at how we would have dealt with something, and how I did deal with these kind of things in the way past, where it sat in my body for a long time.
Absolutely.
And I think I didn't get into dorsal either. You know, my state would be sympathetic. So I'm not sure if it's as easy when you get all the way into dorsal to shift. So I don't have anecdotal evidence on that.
Probably it takes more practice and it's harder. But I think what we're saying, Rob, is that we do see in our own experiences, and certainly with clients, that we become much more efficient at those shifts, right?
Yeah, well, aren't you really talking, I mean, all this talk really gets at the issue of how you build circuits, how you build
Mhm.
circuits.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it becomes, the easier.
Yeah. What wires together, what fires together, wires together.
Yeah, exactly. So like in meditation, in
Yeah.
outcome research and meditation, if you
Yeah.
do meditation long enough, you can experience what they call a left shift. So many people operate on the right prefrontal cortex, a lot of energy there, and that can be depression, and it can be pessimism too. And people who have practiced mindfulness over time, they've noticed through the imaging that there's more activity on the left prefrontal cortex, which is where the glass is half full, and it's more optimism and that kind of stuff, right? So, and that's a matter of continued practice, because you're essentially sculpturing your brain, right? You're sculpting your brain. So anything that you practice and shape the brain in is going to help you improve whatever it is that you're practicing for.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the core of these neural exercises that Steve talked about. Yeah. And the prefrontal cortex actually grows. I mean, it's amazing. That's one of the payoffs that we used to joke about, that, if you've gone through a lot of suffering, and especially with lots of struggling around addiction, that, indeed, if you get into these practices and you really work, yourself with yourself, that you end up actually in a better state with more capacity to manage life's issues and trauma than somebody that's never had to really work at it. So who knows? There's got to be a payoff in here somewhere.
One of the lovely things that I realized, I've been teaching the neuroscience of mindfulness for 18 years, right? I don't know why I didn't include this earlier, but one of the lovely things is when you do sculpt your brain more through neuroplasticity and develop the circuitry, that leads to these kinds of outcomes. What we don't realize is how that actually has saved so much of your life. We talk about gains in different areas, but this is a preventive thing that changes your brain in such a way that you don't even experience the kind of stress or tension that you would if your brain hadn't been sculpted in that way.
Yeah.
So those processes save you a lot of grief that you never even know about.
Yeah.
Never even know about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's another reason, to hang in and to, practice and keep it up. Because, for instance, if you're to stop meditating, we don't know yet, but there's a real good chance the circuitry will weaken over time. I don't know how long it will take, but it will weaken over time.
Yeah.
So polyvagal informed work as well is building circuitry.
Absolutely.
So maintaining.
It has huge implications for addiction too, because as you walk down those pathways in the brain, right, addictive behaviors stop. Addictive behaviors don't happen when you are in a ventral state, which means that this old notion of, the brain disease and you're always an addict, once an addict, and all that just isn't true.
That's right.
So it's very exciting stuff. And look, we filled an hour with the great conversations. December 14th, I'm going to do an evening one at 7:30. We're just trying to vary the times, so maybe we can catch some people, maybe in Australia or I don't know, but on working with addiction and polyvagal theory, and why it's important to ask into the body about addiction if you work with the body. It's not enough to just say, I don't do addiction work, I do trauma work. If you do trauma work, you're probably working with addiction. And if you work in the body and you're working with, people that are curious and have suffered, you need to understand how addictions work in the body. They stop the process in order to save the person, right? And it's not so bad doing this work. It's actually really amazing when people can make amazing progress. And we have so much hope now because all that stuff about how you're always an addict just isn't true. It doesn't have to be true. So come and join. And then in January, we have Leslie Ellis coming, who's just an amazing and delightful woman, very smart. She wrote a book for Routledge called A Clinician's Guide to Dream Work. And she's developed a way of working with nightmares through a polyvagal lens and the Felt Sense Polyvagal model. Leslie's also a focusing trainer, focusing oriented therapist like I am. So we have lots of good things lined up, and I'm working on inviting Mark Lewis to come and join us too, which would be pretty amazing. He wrote The Biology of Desire, and he's a great guy. So, and if any of you are interested in doing a presentation, just let us know. It doesn't have to be any big thing. You can just chat with us for 20 minutes about something you're curious about. Because really, this is all like, we're just making our way. We're finding our way, right? It's new. So it's fun in that way. It's fresh. Okay, I think it's a wrap. Thank you, Rob, for joining us, and come anytime. And thanks, Annette.
Nice to see everybody. Yep.
And so nice to be with all of you. Thank you so much. See you soon. Stay connected on the group page.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye for now.